For many years, I didn't want to tell this story. It is painful, embarrassing, and to a greater extent, unbelievable. But if I'm ever to move on, I need to put this behind me for good. So yes, I'm gonna talk about Costa Rosa. A lot of you are probably gonna say, "What's Costa Rosa?" And yeah, that's fair. It was a niche hashtag that circulated certain social media circles back in 2017. I was a sort of background community manager for a group of influencers. No big mainstream names, but they had a decent set of followers. They were all into the more obscure corners of the web, focusing on a particular age group, a social issue, or some kind of special interest. These were people who got sponsorships by staying content approachable, sponsor friendly, and authentic. In truth, they all had media coordination groups with managers, stylists, and a whole slew of background people making sure their content was filtered and greenlit. I was part of this background team. For obvious reasons, I can't say their names. Some of them are still around, in one way or another. Others I will refrain from mentioning out of respect for their loved ones. Now, Costa Rosa. For weeks, me and the coordinators had been running into a problem. There was something we called an expectation of excellence, and it was getting impractical to coordinate localized trips and bookings for content creators on different continents. We had a vegan guy in Cardiff, and a friendly, middle-aged, kinda sorta red state baker in Tennessee. As you can imagine, we had to do a lot of varied work. So, after weeks of dwindling interest, we had to funnel attention into something new. Someone had this idea of a joint resort. We reached out to various locations about sponsorship deals, and in return, we'd make their place look gorgeous. It was the kind of push where we could put all of our eggs in the same basket and get some great content out of it. Problem was, no one was biting. Then someone said, "Does it have to be a real place?" It sounded like a stupid question. I mean, it had to be. You can't go somewhere that doesn't exist. But the more you think about it, you can make anything as real as you want it. "We could say it's exclusive," someone said. "Invite only." "A private island kind of thing," another chimed in. "We just need a name." "And an area. Some Central American island. Think Belize, Panama, Sri Lanka." "Sri Lanka is in Africa." "No one cares." We finally settled on a fictional island off the coast of Costa Rica. All we needed was a name. I'd been quiet up until that point, and the silence was getting to me, so I just threw it out there. "Let's call it Costa Rosa?" The Pink Coast was our make or break project. We came up with all kinds of crazy ideas. We had a food guy who pulled out 3 kinds of crab recipes and called them cultural secrets of the locals. One of our video guys added that we could edit certain videos to make the beach look pink. We came up with names for streets, hiking trails, local fishing boats, all of it. We made a list of every fruit you could find on the island. We made it all up, just so that if anyone asked, we'd have the answers. It got to the point where people were loudly clapping at each other's lies. I vividly remember when someone came up with the idea of bioluminescent waterfalls, saying it could be the proof of the island's beautiful biodiversity. and I'm not gonna lie, I was into it. This was the kind of business we were in, and Costa Rosa was this huge, breathing dollar sign. And of course, our influencers would be into it. You just had to frame it all in a way that made them look like heroes, inspiring the little people to step out of their comfort zone and aim for the stars. I was having some trouble privately, though. I graduated college with a bachelor's in communication. That's where I met my fiancée. But I sort of stumbled over the influencer business. I've always been a bit pear-shaped, and working with these larger-than-life beautiful people made me feel like I was part of the in crowd. I'd never had that, which was something my fiancée couldn't really understand. We got into a ton of fights about it. When you work from your phone, you're never really off the clock. You see something cool when you're out shopping. Tag it, send it. You hear about some interesting place downtown. Check it out, talk to the owner, get a foot in the door. People around me got tired of never really just hanging out with me, and in hindsight, I can see why. They were always the third wheel. But when our first Costa Rosa content was launched, things turned bad. We were having some of the worst fights ever. I thought it was inspiring. He thought it was fraud. I argued that we weren't selling anything, but he argued we were selling a lifestyle. Either way, it got to the point where we postponed the wedding. I suppose it was a good thing we'd been too lazy to renew our passports. Or we'd be out thousands of dollars from a non-refundable honeymoon. We didn't officially separate, but the distance from the couch to the bed seemed longer every day. In about 2 weeks, the whole project went off the rails. Sure, we were getting clicks, and we had a couple of sponsorships lined up, but there were some things we hadn't anticipated. For example, there was another group in Eastern Europe that hijacked the whole thing. They made their own videos with their own influencers going to Costa Rosa. They never even talked to us about it. They just stole the whole thing. They weren't even discreet about it. We had a couple of other small-time copycats. Some people mentioned turning down an invitation to go there on Twitter. Others mentioned how they'd been contacted, but refused to go for one reason or another. There was this one London-based singer who claimed she was going there, only to cancel at the last minute and showing her fans a gift bag from the organizers on a live stream. But somehow, things got worse. Scams, fake raffles and lotteries. Like this video to get a chance to go to Costa Rosa kind of stuff. And it was moving some real money too. We were panicking. We'd never signed off on that. Our talent hadn't either. But what were we supposed to do? If we came clean, our careers were over. One person in the team came up with an idea. We could go somewhere that is as close to Costa Rosa as possible and show the real thing. That way we had our backs covered. We could point to the map and say that was it. Sure, we could admit taking a few artistic liberties, but it would cover our tracks. And somehow, we found the perfect spot. I didn't know the real name of the place. We all agreed to just call it Costa Rosa, as to not slip up. It all went by so fast. There was a group call, something about boarding tickets, someone waiting to pick me up. I lost my luggage at the airport, but there was no time to stop. All I had to do was get there, and everything would sort itself out. I slept through the flight and mumbled through the transfer. There was a boat somewhere. Temperature shifted and the language on the signs looked different from home. And within a few hours, I was standing with my bare feet buried in the pink sands. They really were pink. Now, we'd made up a lot of stuff about Costa Rosa. Sure, the pink beaches was one thing, but there was also the fog. We'd called it a refreshing summer phenomenon, a heavy fog that rolled in from the coast every morning, causing this white, almost cyan mist. But there really was a mist on that island. I could barely see my hands in front of me as I stepped through it. Seeing this place for the first time felt like a Disney movie. You can't really believe spots like this really exist. It was almost exactly as we described it. Pink sands, fruit trees, colourful birds. No bioluminescent waterfall though. Then again, those were only seen at night. I couldn't believe how lucky we'd been. This might as well have been the real thing. We were a group of 16 people, 4 of which were influencers. The rest of us were all behind the camera. We were all saying the same thing. It felt like stepping into a dream. It was too perfect, and we knew perfect. Perfect was our business. There was no one there to greet us, so we didn't know where to go. Our bags must have been taken to the hotel. We figured they'd gotten the arrival time wrong, so we spent most of the afternoon just relaxing by the water, watching the tides roll in to tickle our feet. It really was beautiful. I remember dozing off for a bit as the others tried to get the hotel manager on the line. Someone suggested we walked, but we had camera equipment and not a lot of patience. And, well, we weren't in a hurry. It was mid-afternoon when Jay woke me up. Jay was one of our cameramen, a Southeast Asian guy with these big round glasses. No matter what you said, he'd just nod and smile, not because he didn't understand, but because he'd found out early on that it was best to just kind of go with the flow, lean into the vibe. "There's people," he said. "I think we're heading out." I groaned and got up, only to see a dozen strangers flocking around our team. A lot of smiles, hugs, and welcomes. Pleasant people. Then I realized these people didn't live on the island. They weren't even crew. They were tourists. "I can't believe we're here," someone yelled. "I thought it was a scam," another said. "And to God, I thought it was a scam. I did." People were coming up to shake our hands and chat. All of them were viewers of our content, in one way or another. They recognized our talent immediately, who shot me a half-smiling, "please get me out of here" kind of look. We took charge and sorted things out, making sure we all got some space to breathe, and making it clear that we appreciated the enthusiasm, but that this was a private occasion. The tourists didn't seem to mind. They weren't coming down from their high any time soon. "I can't believe we're here," one said. "It really feels like a dream." We walked. There was no point in standing around, and we needed some space from the tourists. I couldn't believe how bad our luck was. The place had been thoroughly vetted, and the chance of someone else finding it the same time we did was astronomical. It wasn't just unlikely. It was close to impossible. It was one of our talents, Kim, that finally spoke up. A short woman in her early 30s with a big personality. She had this marriage advice / calisthenics themed channel. "Can whoever booked this just call the hotel?" she said. "It's been hours." Everyone stayed quiet. We didn't have a clear answer. We all just kinda pointed at one another and figured someone who didn't show up was the one who made the booking. But it left a strange thought. This had all gone very fast. Suspiciously so. We spent most of the afternoon and the early evening following a long road, picking fruit straight from trees and drinking from the island springs. We met a couple more tourists, but they didn't seem to recognize us. They didn't even speak the language. They were just sort of happy to be there. It was all so fantastic. You didn't feel tired, no matter how long you walked. You didn't get that hungry or thirsty. There was fresh fruit hanging from low branches, and exotic smells coming from blooming flowers. There was this one blue-looking sunflower that was about as tall as me, just off the side of the road. Everything just felt right. Promoting a place like that would be the simplest thing in the world. But there was also some strange quality to it, and I couldn't help but to notice it affecting the others. I first saw it on Jay. He was looking down at his hand, slowly opening and closing his fingers, like he was trying to sense something. When he noticed me looking, he reached out and put his hand on my cheek. I pulled back a little. "Sorry," he said. "I didn't know you were real." I laughed it off, and he did too. We never found the hotel. We did find a few road signs, but no one was paying enough attention to care. The roads had the same names as those we'd brainstormed in our group chat. Some of them hadn't even been made public. As the sun began to set, the island changed. We could see a faint glow coming from the water, and there was a serenade of hissing insects in the distance. Even at its coldest, Costa Rosa was comfortable. Some folks stripped down into their underwear. It all had this sort of spring break kind of vibe, like we weren't actually there to work, but to enjoy ourselves. Some folks were pulling pranks. 2 guys went skinny dipping. One of our producers found a mossy spot near a rock and took a nap. And Kim, the faithful calisthenics person, she was making out with one of our social media managers. By the time I walked away, they'd gone to second base. But I paid close attention to Jay. There was something about him that didn't seem right. He was pulling off these slices of bark from a tree and rolling it into a pointy end. He poked his finger with it over and over, as if to see if he could feel it. I don't think he did. He was smiling too much. It was hard to concentrate. I was constantly shaking my head, trying to focus. I must have looked like I was having a seizure, but I doubt anyone was paying attention. They were busy dipping into their own kind of nonsense. As the sun set on Costa Rosa, I fell asleep in the moss. It was the warmest, kindest sleep I'd ever felt. Perfect temperature, perfect softness. Who the hell needed a hotel anyway? By morning, the fog rolled back in. I could barely see my own hands. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was or how I got there. It took me a moment to mentally retrace my steps. The flight, the boat. It was all a blur. All that mattered was that I'd made it to Costa Rosa. Everything else was secondary. It looked like everything had been covered in a soft cloud. I could see a couple of silhouettes in the distance, but I couldn't tell who was who. I sat there taking in the atmosphere, eating a fresh fruit for breakfast, though I couldn't remember where I got it from. When the morning fog finally cleared, there weren't many of us left. Some had wandered off, others had made their way back down the road. There were also these hiking trails that I suspect some had followed. Both Kim and Jay were gone, and no one seemed to have a plan. We were all distracted, me included. As I walked around, feeling the gentle moss between my toes, I tried to think of what I'd packed. A pair of socks, a shirt, anything. I could vaguely imagine the suitcase, but I couldn't make heads or tails of what I'd packed. I remembered getting into a taxi, or maybe an Uber, but then there was this blank space. There was a check-in somewhere, a ticket, maybe. I tried to think of my fiancé. Were we still together, officially? But there was something we talked about that was nagging me. Not our flights, but something trivial. It really bothered me, like an itch in the back of my mind. It took me a while to realize I'd wandered around in a daze. I had no idea where I was anymore. There was no path. The others were gone. And yet, everything was pleasant. It must have been around noon when I finally saw some other people in the distance. A small group gathered around a clearing. My first instinct was to wave at them, but my chest tightened. There was something off about them. Giving it that second of hesitation, I noticed a couple of things. All three of them were fully undressed, and they were strangers to me. There were two young men and an older woman. One of the men was carrying something in his right hand, and they were all looking down at the ground. I kept my head low and listened from a distance. "It feels so real," the man holding something said. "Like I'm really here." "It's amazing," said the older woman. "It's perfect." They shared some fruit and had a laugh. I was just about to get up when I saw the man holding something turn to another angle. He was holding a gun. He pointed it at something on the ground and fired 3 rounds. The others cheered. "I've always wanted to do that." He smiled. "I love this." They turned their attention northward, away from me. They must have heard something. Chuckling to themselves, they walked away, leaving me to sneak ahead to see what they'd done. The soothing tropical silence cast a stark contrast to the sudden gunshot. I almost choked on my own spit when I saw her, face down in the ground. Kim, shot dead at close range. More people had arrived at Costa Rosa that morning. It's like everyone had been invited and arrived at the same time. They all said the same thing. This was a dream. Too good to be true. They couldn't believe that there really was a Costa Rosa, and that they were there to enjoy it. No. For them, this was too unbelievable. I stayed close to a road, listening and watching, hoping to see someone I recognized. But it was getting harder to concentrate. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. It had to be a dream. I barely felt my fingers when I pinched myself, and yet, for some reason, I knew I shouldn't give in, even though it was easy to do so. I heard gunshots throughout the day. There was smoke in the distance, and by dinner time, when I went to the beach, I saw two women playing in the ocean, trying to drown one another. They laughed and cheered as they fought, scratched, and strangled one another. They could barely feel a thing. It was just a funny game. But one of them dipped below the surface, and the bubbles stopped. And yet, the other kept laughing. The more people I met, the more nightmarish they seemed. Some of them brought things to the island, like the man with the gun. One brought chains. One brought barbed wire. There was this one guy walking up and down a hiking trail with some kind of Star Trek sword. Others seemed friendly enough, casually chatting with people they recognized. But sometimes, they just act out and attack, seemingly at random. In the afternoon, I heard someone yell. They spotted one of our talents. I think it was the baker. All of a sudden, people were rushing to find them, cheering as they bound and leapt through the sands. "I've always wanted to meet her," someone said. "She has such a lovely voice." "I can't fucking stand her," another muttered. "Self-centered bitch." It's like they were thinking out loud. It wasn't a conversation, just a constant verbal stream of thought. I followed them for a while. A few of them saw me, I think, but they didn't care. I wasn't the famous face they were looking for. I looked like anyone. I didn't want to think of what they might do if I tried to intervene. I was outnumbered. But as I watched from afar, I didn't pay enough attention to my immediate surroundings, where a familiar face crept closer. I didn't notice Jay until he was right next to me. I barely recognized him. He'd fashioned a shiv from a broken camera stand, and he was half covered in dry blood. And yet, he was calm as can be, slow blinking like a warm cat resting on the porch. He reached for me, and my instinct was to pull back. But he could have that shiv in my neck in an instant. I froze. He slowly ran a bloody hand across my cheek. That was it. "I've always wanted to do that," he whispered. "You looked so soft." He nuzzled his nose against my ear and sighed. Then he stepped away. "You're so nice," he mumbled. "I like you." And that was it. He wandered off, having let his intrusive thoughts win. Maybe I was lucky not to be running through his mind any more than that. Maybe, to him, I just looked soft. Maybe that was all there was to it. Others weren't so lucky. They got hold of the baker and dragged her out of the woods. They were cheering and screaming. They tied her to a pole and dragged her through the pink sands like a prize pig. "It's not real," she cried. "It was never real. We made it up. We made it the fuck up." I couldn't bear to look. Someone had a knife, and another had a spear. Others were recording with their phones. The screaming grew shrill and panicked before it stopped. They left her roasting on the fire. Everyone wanted a part. Some of them were adoring fans. Others just wanted to see a woman burn. They sent out search parties to look for the others. Most tourists had stopped caring, instead resorting to rolling and mewling on the beach like animals in heat. I must have sat there for hours before somebody noticed me. A middle-aged man with wild hair and dark eyes. I couldn't see what he was chewing on, but it smelled like meat. "Come sit by the fire," he said. "It's perfect." I wanted to say no, to run, but I had to keep a low profile, or I'd be next. If I just pretended, I could at least get some time to figure out a plan. So despite my instincts screaming at me to flee, I swallowed my fear. "All right," I said. "I'll do that." He smiled at that, not giving it a second thought. They made a second fire in the sand. They danced and sang. Some of them had brought bottles, presumably with some kind of vodka. It was a torrential mess of impulses on display, everything from violence to carnality. I sat by the fire, hoping I had disappeared deep enough into the background for no one to notice. It seemed to work. I sat there, staring into the flames, where a crackling cranium stared back. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up long enough for the bone cinders to turn ashen, and for the morning fog to roll in. It was like watching the island get wrapped in a blanket, but there was something more to it, now that I paid attention. There were people walking in and out of it, people coming and going. Some disappeared into the mist, while others appeared out of nowhere. There was no way boats or planes were coming and going that fast. I could only draw one conclusion. Costa Rosa was, in no uncertain terms, not real. This couldn't be real. I wanted to give up. The others seemed to have it so easy. They just accepted it for what it was. Love, hate, violence. They could do it all, and not feel a thing. But I was too close to it. I knew Costa Rosa for what it was, and no matter how many times I wandered into that morning fog, it wouldn't let me leave. That morning, I figured it out. The thing that had been bothering me. The passports. My fiancée and I hadn't renewed our passports. It would have been impossible for me to travel abroad. Somehow, I must have known that all along. Maybe that's why I wasn't as affected as the others. I had this gnawing reminder that I couldn't get out of my head. But now that I'd realized it, did that mean I was as susceptible as the rest of them? There were a lot of new faces there. Others came and went. Some were happy just laying on the beach, soaking up the sun. Others were hung from trees and skinned. It was an absurd mix of impressions. Two people walking hand in hand on the beach, discussing their favorite TV show. And by the tree line, a man making a dagger from a broken rib. I didn't get out of it unscathed either. There was this one woman who was obsessed over my hair and tore out a fistful of it. One young man just went up to me and started kicking again and again until he got bored. I had rocks thrown at me, not with the intent of hurting me, but as to settle some kind of bet. A contest, perhaps. But it was just starting. Every hour, something was escalating, devolving. By nightfall, the luminescent waters ran red. People were tied burning to palm trees, leaving sizzling corpses behind. Some were howling at the sky and killing each other with sharpened flint, bone, and rock. They painted each other with ash and blood, screaming and laughing intermingled, and I couldn't tell them apart. To them, it was all just a dream, and nothing mattered. I found a hole and covered myself with palm fronds, hoping to wait out the night. I didn't want to take any chances. People were getting attacked left and right, and there was no telling what they might do if they noticed me. They were barely speaking anymore. Some were just screaming or barking at one another. A couple of coherent voices were screeching nonsense about a broken god and a rotting tree plucking the moon from the sky. Then, a noise. My cell phone. I forgot I even had it. I thought the battery had run out long ago, but apparently it hadn't. The service was showing 0 bars, but I got a text. I pulled it up, reading it inches from my face. It was from my fiancée. I know we need space, but I miss you. That's all there was. I tried to respond, but couldn't. No bars. I held the phone close to my chest, feeling my pulse tap against my hands. People were running back and forth, just a couple of feet from my hiding space. They were taking down trees, making rope, cutting down the island, each other, and themselves. It was all just firewood to them. Then someone looked down. I could see a white eye through a space in the fronds. It was a young man, no older than 20. Half his head was shaved, with a deep cut going from his eyebrow. He kept getting blood in his left eye, making him spastically blink. "Little mole lady in her hidey hole," he said. "Is that as deep as you go?" I didn't say anything. I looked up at him, hoping he'd get bored if I didn't provoke him. But it did nothing. He straightened his back and picked something up. Something long and sharp. "Let's get you out of there, mole lady." A makeshift spear made from a plastic rod. The first stab struck my left bicep, poking into a nerve. The second strike hit inches from my ear, making a couple of strands of hair stick to the mud. The third strike dug into the edge of my shoulder, cutting a surface wound. It was all so fast that I didn't get to think. Before I could even begin to kick and scream, something happened. The young man, like so many others, was attacked. A quick strike to the neck. He clutched his throat and collapsed into my hiding spot, warm blood pooling over my torso. Desperate fingers clawed at me, silently begging for help. His attacker walked up to get a better look. Turns out, it was Jay. He looked at me and his victim. It's like it didn't even register with him. Jay had seen and done so much that this was like having breakfast. It was barely a conscious action. He leaned in a little to get a better look, and smiled. He must have recognized me. As always, he wandered off. I lay there with a dying man on my chest, and waited for it all to be over. I just had to make it through the night. I clutched my phone until my fingers clamped shut, and closed my eyes. No sleep came to me, and a kaleidoscope of screams and cheers filled my mind with unspeakable images. But through it all, I waited. People rushing by didn't really take notice. All they saw was a dead man, resting on a bed of palm fronds. By morning, I had a plan. People who bought into the fantasy of Costa Rosa seemed to come and go as they pleased. Every time that morning fog rolled in, something happened. So I was going to give it one final push. A real, honest attempt. I wandered down to the beach. The pain from my cuts and bruises was dull but ever present. A soft breeze touched my exposed hair. Then I took out my phone, turned it to selfie mode, and pressed record. And despite there being no bars, the video went live. "Hey," I said, mustering every bit of cheer I could. "Thanks for dropping in. Here I am, living the good life at Costa Rosa. Just look at this beach. Why'd you ever want to go home? Right?" I don't know whether anyone was watching. Maybe there was no one on the other end, but the camera felt like an eye, looking straight through me. "Right?" I repeated. I held my smile for as long as I could. The video feed got cut, and the battery died. Then, a gunshot. A young man by the tree line, at the edge of the morning fog. Same one who'd taken down Kim. Fucking vultures. I didn't even notice going down on one knee. I couldn't get back up. Clutching my stomach, I kicked and crawled away from the beach and into the ocean. Only then did I realize I'd been shot in the stomach. The salt stung my wound. Costa Rosa was perfect. It was beautiful. It was everything we needed it to be, and it would take me home. I just had to believe in it. I'd shown loyalty, and it would reward me. It had to. Dear God, it had to. I took one final breath as my head dipped beneath the surface. Fog. In the distance between Costa Rosa and wherever we may be, there is a glimpse of something inhuman. Something that listens to what we want and makes it happen. Like we wished upon stars as kids, we wished upon likes and favorites as adults, praying they'll grant us our desperate wants. Money, love, fame. The same wishes, but different stars. They only gave us what we asked for. There was no malice, just an island in the sun. Salt water slipped into my ears. I could hear my heart slowing. A pressure built in my head as I sank. A fog draping over my eyes. I reached out, hoping. The fog parted. I was crawling. The sand had turned to concrete. A pleasant breeze turned to sudden cold. It was desolate and familiar. I'd walked up that driveway 1,000 times. I was home. I called out to my fiancé, and he heard me. And through the gunshot, the stab wounds, and the bruises, a single soothing balm remained. I managed to say my thought out loud. I got your message. I'd been gone for days. I'd just walked out of the house and disappeared. No one had seen or heard it. I'd just been gone. They'd been looking for me. I tried keeping up with the others from the hospital. Most were dead. The baker had burned to death in her bed. Kim had been shot. Others fell asleep behind the wheel and destroyed themselves. But it didn't read as mysterious deaths, brought on by mysterious circumstances. It was all just the way these things happen. People die in fires and cars every day. I didn't have an answer when they asked who shot me. I told them someone came out of the fog. It was a half-truth, at least. Jay, on the other hand, was still missing. If I were to guess, he's still on Costa Rosa, living his best life. That video of me on the beach of Costa Rosa is still out there. It's real. You can see the fog and the pink sand. I've seen some bot networks copy and paste parts of it in some kind of AI-generated compilation crap. But the hashtag is gone. The promos too. I think our sponsors scraped the SEO clean from the web. I've gone back to get a master's degree since then. If this has taught me anything, it is that I'm a good listener, and I should do something with that. But you won't see me in the comments anytime soon. I've gotten married. My wounds have healed. But it still stings whenever I see someone mention those I used to work with. I see their faces in thumbnails sometimes, adorning things like top 50 social media celebrity deaths and other morbid crap. I think those pink beaches are still out there somewhere, and the bioluminescent waterfall. But honestly, I've started to forget what it felt like. Maybe that's the price you pay when you turn your back on Costa Rosa. You start to forget. That's partly why I had to record this. But I suppose if there's anything I've learned, and will remember forever, it's this. If you're in the business of lies, you can't expect good things to come true. I hope you enjoyed the story. For more content, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Your support keeps the shadows dark. If you want more Sinister, links to my social media and Spotify can be found in the description, unless you're already there. Don't forget to sign up to the Patreon, where you can see all the content a day earlier, and an exclusive video every month once we hit 20 patrons. Until next time, keep your lights low, eyes open, and your doors locked.